See, there was a question over there.
I was struck by the cogence of Preston's remarks about the nexus between water and energy. And here we are in a city that has made great strides in taking care of one aspect of its microclimate problem by replacing white roofs, using white roofs to replace black asphalt surfaces. At the same time, we're living in a world where there are things much larger in area than roofs. Human activity has so far altered the appearance and the reflectivity of about half the land surface of the Earth. Well, when corporations get to be the size of nations in terms of their economic activity, they very often have carbon footprints that are comparable. And so likewise, they have albedo footprints that are comparable. You change the reflectivity of large areas, obviously, in mining operations, as you do when you use hydroelectricity. And I wanted to alert you to the fact that not just corporations have been paying attention to this problem. I'm in the physics department at the university where we've been doing research on addressing something very easily ignored, the color of water. That since so much of the planet consists in its hydrosphere, that our ability to brighten water may in fact be, if we apply it intelligently, a tool on a par with what we do to mitigate the absorption of solar energy by the atmosphere by cutting CO2. So since you do have a lot of water at stake, do you have any plans to conserve water in hydroelectric reservoirs, for example, simply in order to maintain the level of integration that you've achieved so far?
That is actually something I hadn't thought of. Now, maybe there's somebody deep in our corporation that's working on that, but we don't have any concerted effort to look at that. So I'd be interested in speaking to you afterwards about it.
Okay, connection. Here we go.
I have a microphone already.
You're next. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Pamela Peters, environmental economist, dividing her time between consulting for governments and localities and then media production to educate, and I also call it edutain the consumer because the consumer has a lot of power. Talking about resilience, I would like to address the financial resilience. As an economist, I find that there are certain externalities that are not accounted for, meaning there are certain price tags that the community is paying for, the tax dollars, instead of corporations. How are you preparing for changing accounting systems? And second, according to another perspective regarding resilience, increasing prices for minerals, etc. How are you dealing with that?
I guess I'll start. In terms of increasing prices for minerals, long may it last. More seriously, we're driven largely by our input prices, by the cost of labor, by the cost of the commodities that we buy. Looking at the economic impacts of climate, I think I mentioned earlier, we have been building carbon pricing into all of our investment decisions for the past 10 years, actually a bit longer than 10 years. And that's true whether we are operating in a jurisdiction that currently has carbon pricing or not. So right now, about 2/3 of our operations are in a jurisdiction where there is some form of carbon pricing. And so that sets some boundaries that are pretty clear to understand. But nevertheless, we apply that same thinking process around carbon pricing even where we currently don't have carbon pricing systems in place. So that's one way that we can ensure that these investments that we're making that might last many decades are going to be resilient to future government actions. We do take a scenario planning approach. I guess Shell is probably the most notable company in the world for scenario planning, and we're nowhere near the level that Shell is. But we certainly do look at some pretty robust scenarios around which way carbon pricing may go. We have convened a panel of climate experts from around the world to give us advice on what that carbon pricing should look like. It's not something we reveal publicly because we think it's a competitive advantage for us. But certainly it is an integral part of every investment decision that we make. And I sit on the investment committee for the company. There's only 3 people on that committee, our CFO, the CEO, and myself. And I am one of the persons who ensures that that carbon pricing gets active discussion in those investment decisions.
I think from a utility perspective, it certainly affects us in a little bit of a different way. But the way I would describe it, if you look at our industry's history, and I'll oversimplify, the first 100 years was about increasing the use of fossil fuels to meet local demand, to help drive the economy. The last 20 years has been trying to stabilize that, and then hopefully the next 20 years and beyond is to eliminate it where possible. And it's really enabled us to change, as you say, the accounting systems and the financial incentives that for the first 100 years, to be honest, we were incented to get our customers to use more energy. And in a world where you're pushing for sustainability, that's not the right equation. So a number of years ago, we went into our regulator and we petitioned for something called revenue decoupling. And in simple terms, what revenue decoupling is it decouples our revenue or our profitability from our customers' usage. So we no longer have an incentive to get them to use more energy. In fact, we now have incentives in that we share in their energy usage reduction. So our profitability is driven by the same profitability as our customers. If they can use lower energy and less energy, we actually make more money as a corporation. And we believe that's the right incentive mechanism, whereby the interest of the company and our resources are aligned with our customers, and that both of us and then those local communities, which previously did have impacts, benefit from that lower footprint.
Okay, over here.
Thank you. My name is Nate Freeman. I'm with North Carolina State University, the Climate Change and Society program there. And we're in the human capital business in higher education. And basically what I do is I go to businesses and municipal government representatives, and I say, well, what do you need for climate adaptation expertise? And then with our students or applicants, I ask them, where are you coming from? Where do you want to go in your career? And try to help them design their curriculum to help fill those needs, so that we have a new generation of experts in climate adaptation. So I can think of different needs that all of you may have. Ken, you guys have to think about disaster risk reduction and planning, having a portfolio of engineering decisions based on different sea level rise. Preston, you've got a transportation or supply chain issue with the diamond mine. I also have a piece of your copper from Kennecott back at home.
Great.
And Alan, the insurance industry has been way on top of the risk. And actually, this goes across the board. This is becoming really a question of lobbying and communications campaigns and marketing. And so with all of that in mind, my question is, are you beginning to think about universities and how they can help provide the human capital that you need? And I would like to mention that NC State is the 5th program in the country. There's only literally one handful of adaptation-focused degree programs in the country, although those should be growing. And I would like to also reference my my newly found colleague, Joyce, here from University of Notre Dame.
All kinds of connections being made.
I mean, I'll be happy to start. I think the one huge opportunity we have is that the students who attend your universities really grew up in an era where sustainability is part of the conversation. Unfortunately, when many of us went to school, it wasn't part of the curriculum. And I have 4 young children myself, and when they come home, I hear them singing songs about recycling and reducing and reusing. When I was in school, we were singing 99 bottles of beer on the wall. So, it's moved in the right direction. But what worries us is, for some reason, those students aren't as interested in the math and the science, as I was when I was in high school. And you've got to create that connection. So certainly at the university level, and I'll come to that in a moment, but it actually starts, much earlier than that. And I think most studies show between about ages 11 and 15, 12 and 14 is when students either remain engaged or they become incredibly disengaged and distracted by the other things you face when you become a teenager. And we're now getting into the schools at the middle school level. We just opened the first ever high school for energy studies in New York. Energy Tech in Queens opened in September. And at the university level, we're now partnering with a number of local colleges to try to say, what are those workforce needs of the future? And more it is climate-driven, it is resiliency-driven, and coming up with programs where we have internships, where we help design the curriculum. In upstate New York at Union College, brand new program this fall we've helped launch where it actually studies this exact topic. So I think the risk is that there's not a pipeline of students coming in. I think the real opportunity is that this next wave is really growing up in an era where they're not only talking about it, but they're singing songs and really believe in it.
Rio Tinto has university partnerships around the world because we're a global company. Some of those are focused on technological innovation, and others are on, frankly, just access to key talent. But I think, and so we do some of the things that were just talked about. But I think there's another sort of flavor to what you're describing, which applies to the entire workforce. And a phenomenon that I've seen as I go around the company is our employees talking about Rio Tinto's positioning in the climate debate, or more generally around sustainable development. And frankly, it's an attractant for employees of all types, not just with the skill sets to tackle those problems, but even other people who work in the company want to work for a company that is facing these issues head on. So it helps us attract a wide variety of talent, not just the specialized talent that you referred to.
Yeah, I'd echo that last point. For us, I mean, sometimes our business people will say to me, well, Al, what are we getting on the business side from the environmental recognition that we're achieving? And frequently there's not an easy correlation, meaning we're not sure that businesses are buying insurance from us because we have a green reputation. On the other hand, we get tremendous employee engagement around the issue.
Yes. Yes, Bill.
Hi, Bill Nitzer with Oceana Energy. We design hydrokinetic turbines to convert tidal energy into electricity. I have a question, I think, directed more to the insurance industry about the politics of risk pricing and the President's Climate Action Plan. Some months ago, Lloyd's came out with an excellent report which basically accused the federal government of gross mispricing of risk through its flood insurance program, and was only slightly more flattering at other politically motivated regulators with respect to their interference in what they regarded as a rational market for risk. And I, wearing another hat, have had some discussions with the reinsurance industry on how to address this problem from a private-public policy initiative point of view, particularly in light of the references to insurance in the President's Climate Action Plan. And Renaissance Ray in particular has taken the lead here. It's promoted many of the things that you mentioned, such as better building codes and other incentives for risk-reducing activity by policyholders. But from a reinsurance industry point of view, this hasn't gone nearly far enough, and pricing is kind of a year-by-year affair, where, you look at Miami Beach, 30 years from now, it's uninsurable. And so the question is, how do you anticipate? I mean, I've talked to the deputy mayor of New York, Far Rockaway, the neck of Staten Island. Should anybody be rebuilding any homes there at all? My answer to that question is no. And many years ago, FEMP bought out a town on the Missouri River and moved it out of the floodplain. That strikes me as rational, far-thinking behavior. So I guess my question is industry being nearly radical enough on the question of risk pricing in light of the way risks are moving? And what can it do to work more effectively with all levels of government to avoid political distortions in said risk pricing?
So that's a great question, and I would say that on the optimistic side, I do see seeds of a more realistic conversation around that issue in different places. So if you take a place like Florida, when Florida first started their own state-run property insurer, it was supposed to be the insurer of last resort. It is now the insurer of first resort. It is the biggest insurance company in Florida, and the rates are not actuarially sound rates. insurance companies that write in Florida, if they take a loss, the law permits a premium to be added to the insurance policies of everybody in Florida, including internal. So people are waking up to the fact that there's subsidization going on, and I think there is emerging a political debate. Now, it's a hard debate, because if you're sitting in the state, I get it. If a lot of people want to move to Florida so that they can live on the coast of Florida, there's economic value there. And so do you want to subsidize that? That's to be debated. We are, as an industry, trying to argue for pricing to be realistic, not to be hidden. I do think that the debate is starting to take hold some. So we saw the flood program last year addressed. There are now efforts to slow it down and unravel it. But I do think there's more attention to the issue than was the case in the past.
But maybe not enough.
Right, no, would love to see more. It's on our list, yes.